Not too many of these, but interesting spots where I lost and where I won that I think bear going over. So let's see here. Got the Queen 4, big blind. See a min open, go ahead and call. This is early in the tournament. We did kind of late reg it, but we're still, I think we're still below the 500 blind by big blind level. Yeah. So we flop a flush draw. No real reason to bet. Player leads at us infinitely small. I often go ahead and just disregard these bets altogether, just because they don't do anything. So you really can't glean much information. So it would basically depend on my hand. If I didn't have as strong a draw, like let's say I was just holding the ace of diamonds, I would probably check raise here and set up a bet scenario. But in this particular case, I decided to just call and take the card off. And we hit the flush on the turn, second nuts, pretty good. We shouldn't really be afraid of King 10 too much because even with that super small bet, players don't do that too often in this stage, in this size tournament. They kind of just always check. So I'm not really ever going to be concerned about a full house. The King's great because somebody with King Queen or Ace King could be in there possibly. And a lot of players like that will under C bet the flop. So we check. Player raises or bets to 4.43. That's half pot, almost or exactly. We decided to go ahead and just min click it back. This kind of serves two purposes. It freezes the action so that we don't get insane bets on the river, and because we don't want another diamond to come out because he could definitely have the ace of diamonds. If he does, he's going to draw anyway, so we don't want to overcommit. So we go ahead and click it back, and it did take the opponent a long time to just call, and he did, and that only leaves him with 22 blinds behind. It's pretty much a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio. I underbet it super small just because I didn't think he would call a jam, even though it is 1-to-1. This player didn't seem to want to throw another buy-in into the tournament. They seemed kind of tight pre-flop. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to make a bet that's going to that's going to always get called, and very rarely it'll get jammed on by a raw 10, or maybe like the ace 10 with the 10 of, or with the ace of diamonds or something like that. Or maybe he even could have hit a straight. But I'm pretty convinced that I have the best hand here 100% of the time. And I'm just looking to get as much value as I can when my hand is so obvious. It's like, what else can I have, right? Because if I don't have a 10, I've got to have a flush. I get called, and this is kind of the nature of how good my read was on the situation. The player was very, very nitty, and he turns over the nut flush, literally the conceivable nuts. Now, I understand hands like King 10 and Queen 10 are the actual nuts, but he's raising out a second position from a tight player. He's not raising those hands. The ace, the flush didn't come into my mind because I didn't realize how poorly this player played for value. But this is one where I can't believe I lost the minimum. And I think if I had checked the river, he probably would have bet even less than me. So I think when I was a worse player, I would have lost less because I might have been afraid of the full house. But this is one that's just a ridiculous scenario. And this is why you can't worry about seeing monsters under the bed, because this is a monster under the bed of like he could have the nut flush, but it's so ridiculous with the way he played it that I think this is a 1% scenario. So this is a good example of where there was a monster under the bed, but I'm still not going to worry about it. It's just kind of ridiculous the way he played it. All right, pocket threes. We see a min raise, call. We go ahead and call in the cutoff. No real reason to 3-bet. We want to see a flop. Flop comes out 9-8-6, not great. But then again, we're in position. We decide to go ahead and check. Turn comes off at 10. This player leads at it. Now, this is the original raiser. He doesn't usually have a 7 here unless it's a hand like a suited A7. That's very possible, or pocket 7s. So I'm not too worried about that. I decided to go ahead and call. The river comes off another 10, and now he bets 9 big blinds. And to me, this just didn't seem like, what 7s does he have? Like, I mean, yeah, there are occasions where he has pocket 9s, 8s, or 6s, made a full house. The 10, I guess, is kind of likely because Jack 10, Ace 10, King 10, all those hands can open here at this stage of the tournament, and especially with his big stack. But the problem is that he it doesn't really, to me, it didn't really make sense. It was like he's trying to get away with the safest bluff possible by not c-betting the flop. If he just c-bets the flop, I just fold. But because he checked it, what's more likely in a three-way pot? The original raiser, who has the strongest range pre-flop, hit this flop or completely missed it. It's kind of more likely he completely missed it. And going into three players, a lot of players don't have the heart to bet into multi-way pots, even though this would have been a perfect opportunity for him. Me and this guy, we have half his stack. We're still okay in the tournament. We don't want to really risk too much. If he just bets the flop, I might take one card off, and then he can bet the turn. Against me in particular, you might see me make a move, but honestly, most of the time, I'm just going to give it up on the flop, man. Just because I didn't get what I wanted, and there's a lot of horrible things that can happen for this board, even if my threes are ahead. But the way that the betting went down, it was one of those ones where it just really seemed fishy. So I decided to go ahead and make the hero call, and yeah, just king queen. Like I said, strongest range pre-flop. Like if he had just c-bet the flop, it would have been over. But this bet on the turn makes literal no sense. What sevens does he ever have? You know what I'm saying? A lot of players, and here's the thing, if he had a set, he would bet bigger. Like even though there's a 7 possible, it's very unlikely because none of us bet the flop. So if he has a set of 6, 8s, 9s, he's going to go ahead and bet bigger. This small bet is usually only a 7. You know what I'm saying? It's like a tester bet or it's a 7. And to me, he never has any kind of 7s, which means it's a tester. And tester is like without any showdown value. And then when he bets the river, it's just like such an obvious bluff. And the bet sizing is still, again, too small. This is a fearful bluff. Like if he had bet, on the turn, let's say he bets, 5.5 or 6 big blinds. There ain't no way I'm calling. It doesn't even matter what I think he has because I'm too vulnerable. But he didn't have the heart to do that. And then on the river, he should be betting 12.5 blinds, and he bets 9. I mean, these are just that bad bluff size that I use to get called. And he's using it actually as a bluff. So just a good little... when things don't seem right, you can kind of sniff it out. I don't recommend making big hero calls, but this one was good, and it really gave me a nice sized pot that took me very far in the tournament. This is a fun one. I remember this one. So we go ahead and min open. We get called behind in the next position. We get called again by the cutoff, and it goes fold around, and we get called in the big blind. Comes down with the overpair on it. Looks pretty good. We decide to go ahead and bet. You don't want to bet small in these. I am capping my range by betting with the one pair, but my one pair is usually going to be best. We see a raise here, and it's a fairly large raise, and I knew this player, and I felt like this is a draw the majority of the time, but they can also have a hand like ace-8 suited, and since all the combos of those are out there, I decided to go ahead and take a card off. The turn comes off the 7, and now he just goes ahead and jams. This is never one pair. That's all you need to know with this betting structure. He didn't get there on the turn with a flush. He outflopped us. This is most obviously a set. Just because he's overprotecting, right? Like this is that, well, I got all the money in the pot, and if you got a flush, then God bless you. That's what this bet is. That being said, I did think about it, and I do have 11 outs with a pair of 9s and the diamond. But still, I do think there is a chance here that he can have pocket jacks. Pocket jacks would play this way. Jacks with jack of diamonds. They don't have to 3-bet. It's kind of vulnerable at our stack sizes. He doesn't want to race for it. So he raises the flop. When he doesn't get jammed on the flop, he can safely jam the turn. So this is one we're just absolutely bet. And I decided just to give it up. Because what are we trying to accomplish? Not much. Right, here's another good one. Interesting hand. We see a 3x open under the gun. There is no small blind, so that's kind of telling, but it's very early in this tournament. This is the last one that we entered for the day. We're very deep stacked. So just because there's no big blind or small blind doesn't really matter. His 3x open is proper because of our relative stack sizes. I decided to go ahead and 3-bet to 14 with my pocket jacks, which is reasonable. We're only 6-handed. We're having fun. It goes back to the original raiser. He jams. This is like the second or third hand of the tournament, by the way. Like, that's the thing to know here. It came back to me, and in game, I just snap folded, and I was just like, my jacks are never good here. And we see a call, and we see the classic aces versus kings. And this is just one where I just thought it was a good example to put in there because it doesn't really matter how good your hand is. Somebody else can have a better hand, and not everybody's doing everything despite you. You know what I'm saying? Like, not everybody's doing everything because you made a move. You know what I'm saying? This cold 4-bet is so fucking telling. It's disgusting. Like, if I was this guy with kings this early in the tournament, because this was an $11 buy-in, I'm definitely getting it in with the kings because there's a chance he can have queens or ace king suited. But I think that's 50-50 between ace king suited and queens being 50% and the other 50% being aces. You know what I'm saying? And versus the aces, if I have live suits, I'm 22%, which sucks. In this exact case, he made it. Hey, Hab Freak, what's going up, man? Appreciate it. Hab sub, there it is. Thank you, my man. A sub in the wake up with me. Let's get you now you got access to all the emotes. Yeah, you subscribed for 2 months with the Prime. I appreciate that, bro. I always forget about my Prime subs. I got to make sure I use them. But yeah, appreciate it. This is just a good example of, we lost 15 blinds on the pot and didn't get it in 3-ways versus aces and kings. So it's just a good example of being aware, I think. It's going pretty good, man. We're just plowing through yesterday's hand reviews. There's not too many of them. I thought I had more, but I guess not. Short-handed. We decided to go ahead and open on the button. I think we're deep in this tournament at this time. Oh, no, it's early. Huh. Why are the stacks so shallow? Oh, I guess they're not. Well, we did enter this one late. I guess the table's populating. That's fine. All right, so we raise. We see a call in the big blind. Player checks. We decide to go ahead and c-bet. He does call. I still am not really convinced anything is going on. And I said in game, and there's a moment where you can see me during and I think I'm going to make it into a review Jedi Mind Trick, because you can see in game I almost leveled myself, where I was like, well, that isn't really good, and I don't really have much. And then my brain remembered, oh wait, you want to bluff the worst hands because they have no value, so you got to give them value for the times you get called. So I went ahead and just stuck to the plan, checked the turn, and then went for the delayed barrel on the river. I think he had something like a pair on this flop. You know what I'm saying? 4, 7, something like that. He never has a king. He could have 5, 6, sure, but I really think it's more likely he had like a pair like 8, 7 or something like that, or 6, 7. And when the board doesn't improve him, and obviously improves king, queen, king, jack, ace, queen, all those hands, like the bigger cards that come out, the better. The queen hits the turn, I think I bet it every time. The jack on the turn was kind of iffy for me. So, yeah, but betting the river, and we did have to bet it pretty big because we got to make a statement, polarizing statement, and he just folds. And he took a minute to fold because I think he was considering it, but it's such a ridiculous spot to call with like 8-7 that I'm glad that I pushed through and made the bet anyway, even though it didn't seem like the greatest scenario. I think I was just leveling myself, which used to be my real problem, like not betting because something could happen. So let's see here. Deuce, 6 of hearts. This ought to be a fun one. We see a raise on the button. See the size of the stacks? Like, I'm chipped up, right? I have a ton of chips, but even 20 big blinds. What's 20 big blinds? It's about... it's like 40 blinds, right? This guy on the button with a big stack raising to 2.2 is not right. He should only be going 2.5 or more. This is wrong. When you're the bigger stack at a table with all medium and short stacks, your bet sizes don't change. These other players can be betting 2 big blinds. Your bet sizing shouldn't change. You should still be basing it based on the blinds. So when he does that, and I do decide to call, comes off 5-5 king. Obviously, this board is kind of one way for him. But again, we just see this little flick bet, and I think I got this idea in my head of that this was like doing nothing. And I got an image in my head of him picking his nose on the freeway and flicking a booger. Like, that's what this bet was. And I was just like, that is nothing. So I decided to go ahead and call it on the float. I check the turn, he checks, and then we just make the big bet on the river. And it's not overly big, like it's about a value size bet. Like if I had the 5 here, I would go much bigger to try to get called. But this is a value bet that you're going to see from your standard player in this tournament at this point. And he just folds. And it's like he raised improperly pre-flop. He bet the flop improperly. He gave up on the turn. And it just allows us to abuse him with the nut low, literally. Like there's no reason my hand doesn't block anything. My hand doesn't have any intrinsic value. It's just such a bad spot to bluff, but because of what he did, he made me feel 100% confident. Let's see here. Pocket J's, we see 2.1 under the gun. Now this player is very short, so I don't mind the raise from that. It is under the gun. I decided to go ahead and 3-bet, like I mostly do with good pairs in this position. It goes all the way back around to him. He jams, and here's the thing. I remember this one, and I only marked this because it was funny to me. I can't fold, and I wanted to do this. He's under the gun, okay? And I wanted to show you how I figure this out in my head after I've run the hands post-game. This is how you figure it out, right? So check it out. So my raise is to 6.6. All right, let's add up everything in the pot first, right? So hang on, I got to get my keypad working here. So there's 1.5 for the blinds and for the big blind and small blind. Plus, we'll just go one big blind for the antes. Plus my 6.6, right? Plus his 23.9. 33 blinds. And we have to call. I'm going to do it side by side so you can see it. Hang on. Give me another calculator. All right. So this is what we're trying to win, okay? Because if we fold now, we have no shot at this. That's what's in the pot, right? And we have to call his 23.9, right, total, minus the 6.6 that we already have in the pot. So we have to call 17.3 to win 33 big blinds. Now you could do the math that way, right, and just divide this by 33, right, which means you have to win 52% of the time to make this, or you have to have that much equity. That's not really proper. So what we're going to do is, what do we say, 17.3 plus the 33 equals 50.3. That's the total. So 2-1. Hey, what's up, Pocket? How you doing, man? So 2-1, we're getting 17.3 to 50.3. So this is just how the way it works, right? So check it out. 50.3 divided by 17.3. We're getting 2.9 to 1 on our money. Okay? That's pretty good. Okay, it's almost 3x. Now we have 34% equity. Let's bring up Equilab and check out the range of hands that does this. Okay? Okay, now you're going to have to take my word on it because I don't have the pre-flop charts open on jonathanlittle.com yet, or right now. The site's acting a little finicky, so I don't have it open yet. Okay? But you have to trust that I know these ranges. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to take Equilab, and we're going to construct a range for our partner here. He's got about 24 big blinds under the gun. And he's opening and then jamming over a 3-bet, right? So what's his range? Obviously aces, ace, king, queens, jacks. I would say ace, queen off can do it. Well, that's a little loose, but let's give it to him. Ace, king suited and ace, queen suited. Because he is so short, I'm going to add jacks, nines, eights. Believe it or not, I mean, because this was still at a point where you could re-enter. And then occasionally there's some just suited hands. So we can go down to, he should properly be doing it with ace 5, ace 4, ace 3 suited. Sorry guys, I had to do that. So this is, let's make it tighter though. Let's just go against his exact range that we think it would be. I think personally, from a bad player, I think this is what you're going to see. Now, if he's really bad, we're going to see it with ace-jack suited. But let's just call this his range, right? So we have that in there. Now here's our exact hand. Okay, we have the two jacks. So we're just going to go ahead and put in Jack of Diamonds, Jack of Hearts, and run and evaluate it. Run the equity. With this range, with all those hands that he could be doing this with, he's going to win 53% of the time. We're going to win 46.8% of the time. We're getting 3-1, which means we only have to win 33% of the time to make this call profitable. So while he was taking his sweet time in game, I was sitting there looking at the camera going, I can never fold. Like, you should know this. Like, it doesn't matter if you have aces. You can show me aces here, and I will call. And I called. And he took a very long time. It was just us. He took a very long time to get the money in, and I snap called. And he rolled over kings, but my call is still proper. I didn't make a mistake because I 3-bet. Now, if I had just called and somebody else had 3-bet and then he jammed, I can easily pitch the jacks. But because of the price, I couldn't fold. And when this jack hit on the turn, man, I literally yelled, good, good, you should lose. Because he had just too many chips. It's not a slow roll. It's not a slow roll. It's I want to make sure I get called, so I'm going to take a long time. It doesn't matter. We're online. We're online. People understand ranges. You know what I'm saying? You're never going to get a fold out of me. So when the money goes in, I've had this happen in live tournaments where the money went in and the guy was like, yeah. And I was like, dude, it's a math problem. It doesn't matter. And I would try to explain it to him later. And it's funny because I remember the one I'm thinking of, I sucked out on that guy too. But I had the proper equity to call because of the small raises and shit that happened. So this is just a good example of how you come to conclusions with if you should call or not, and why some calls are snap calls and some calls are snap folds. Like those other jacks, snap fold, right? Just we didn't have enough equity versus the range of hands that our opponents are gonna do that with. In this situation, it doesn't matter. You could tell us he has aces and we still have to call. It's just one of those things. So don't be afraid of spots like this. And I didn't make a mistake. And yeah, I got lucky. That's great. You know what I'm saying? But did I really? Because I had 48% equity. I only need 33. It's not really lucky, right? I just happened to be 1 in 3 times where it happened. All right, we'll go to this last one, then we'll do some other stuff. So we see, we're in the small blind with 3-3. That's fine. Not much real reason to 3-bet here. I mean, this player is super short, right? So we can't really like finagle with him, because he's kind of want to get it in a lot pre-flop. Flop comes off 9-6-8. Wow, I've seen that flop 3 times today. It goes check on the flop. I decided to go ahead and just bet small on the turn, and I'm doing this because I feel like a high percentage of the time he's going to call the turn, right? I just feel like he's not going to fold for 1 bet unless I make it monstrous. And here's the problem with making it too big. If I make it like 5.5 big blinds, if he continues from there, he really can't fold. Like, he's already invested so much of his stack. So let's say he has something like, Queen Jack of spades, right? And he's got a gut shot, and he's got overcards, and he's got the spades. Most likely, he's just going to jam here. And I'm not going to have any idea that I'm up against that. Now, would he have bet that on the flop? Maybe, but he might not want to get blown off it. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm very likely to have a pair here in the small blind. Just that improved on the board. So it could definitely go check. But my small bet on the turn, what this allows me to do is to leverage and threaten his stack by making a small bet. So this is a little under where I would normally go. I decided to back it off about half a big blind. And he just folds. And this is the rare instance where he just had absolute airballs and didn't want to continue. But I think he even had a hand as good as like ace-jack and just didn't have the heart to c-bet. Like, he could have had the ace-jack of clubs, and he just thinks, oh, this board favors the small blinds so much. It kind of doesn't, like, proper range-wise, but it does favor actual range. Meaning, my proper range for calling out of the small blind is decent hands like, things that aren't great but I can call with. You know what I'm saying? Like, hands that are too good to fold, but not good enough to 3-bet because you don't want to get blown off them. Like Jack 10 suited, right? That's a very good example. I wouldn't want to 3-bet that out of the small blind, you know what I'm saying, because of all its equity. I want to go to the flop. Queen 9 suited, and he's coming, out of the low jack. My range isn't quite as strong as it should be. Now, if he's coming out of the cutoff or the hijack, it's a little different. But for me to raise a low jack player out of the small blind, I kind of have to have something that's going to fare better in a lower stack to pot ratio, like a hand like, good cards, king queen suited, all the ace jacks, and better, suited ace five, stuff like that, hands that are going to fare better if we just decide to get the money in. Hang on a sec, guys. Sorry. Yeah, so this is one of those ones where I think calling pre-flop and making this little flick bet on the flop really worked because we were up against a player who was really trying way too hard to protect their chips, and you can't be afraid to get the money in, So I think that's it for the review. I really thought I had more hands. I thought I marked more, but I guess not. Oh yeah, wait a minute, I did. All hands. There's only 8 hands. Yeah, I guess that was it. Fun. I thought I had a lot more things I wanted to go over, but yeah, it did go pretty smoothly last night. Like, I really just lost on races, and they were great races. They were absolutely, they're the race you take to win the tournament. Like, I would have gotten it in, and I would have had like a top 3 stack twice. I got it in with Ace King in 2 different tournaments, and weird situations, but I ended up losing the race. Is the long story short, So we can play a couple of these. It's nice to see you guys filtering in, saying hi. Yeah, we can go for a little while longer. Why not? So I want to see something fun. I feel like I just want to see certain coaches, so I'm going to look for Jonathan Little himself. And we're going to use some of the man's quizzes here. Oh, here's okay, this will be interesting. Hang on. I gotta mute my own playback and then make this so you guys can hear it. Alright, let's check it out.
Here we are facing a limp from an early position splashy player in the World Series of Poker main event. We have King 6 suited on the button. Should we fold, call, raise to 900, or raise to 1,500?
This one, oh, what's up with my nails? Oh, Shiraz, exclamation point nails. You can see it, but my wife actually does nails. During the pandemic, she got her nail tech license while the rest of us were just getting fatter. She figured out a way to do it, online. They had, the classes, and then she would have to go into the place a few days a week. I only wear them on the one hand, by the way. So I wear them to kind of show off her skill, which she's really good. And I like them, and I always wanted them, and there is kind of a deeper meaning with that. And it's under exclamation point nails. It's a little bit of reading, so yeah. But yeah, I like them. I wear them all the time. And, they're a lot of fun. I really have come to enjoy them. But there's more to it. You can read about it if you want. I'm not going to go through it every time somebody asks me. That's why the command's there. So, yeah, check it out. Let's see. So this is an interesting one because it's a splashy player. We're in the main event of the World Series, which when you hear that, when somebody was reviewing a hand and they go, this is the main event of the World Series, just think to yourself, okay, this is a fish fest. This is just, there's a lot of players who should not be playing for a $10,000 buy-in in this thing, like pretty much 99% of them, right? But whatever. So, splashy player raises. My first instinct, of course, is to always raise, but the proper raise would be to 1,500 because we want to take our call. It's a pot-sized bet, right? That being said, he is splashy, but it's first position. It's just kind of, even a splashy player has to have some kind of range. So I think we're just going to use the button on this one, and in game, I think this is what I would do. I don't know if this is proper. I'm going to have to look. Well, Jonathan will tell us. But I like to just call here because this player in the small blind is tight. We don't have any particular information on the big blind. maybe we just see a nice multi-way pot with a suited king. I think it's fine. If you're going to play this hand, I think right here you play it for the call.
I think you can go either way between limping or raising to 1500. That said, King 6 suited doesn't really stand to be ahead of the splashy player at all, right? So even if the splashy player is playing some marginal hands, I don't really think raising to 1500 does us much good. If we thought the limper was especially weak and tight and would fold to a raise the majority of the time, then sure, make it 1500. I think that would be great. But given we are going to get called a lot of the time, it means we are going to see the flop a lot of the time, and if we're going to see the flop, I would rather the pot just be small, because I'm essentially putting in nothing to try to win a decent pot post-flop. This hand does have reasonable implied odds. You do have to be careful with the suited with the king-high suited hands, because sometimes you make a flush and still lose, so you have to be a little bit cautious in that scenario. But I think it's good enough to splash around here as long as you play well post-flop. And big blind checks. One nice thing about raising, by the way, is that if you do raise and only the splashy player calls, you get to play the pot heads up in position, which you're going to win more often than not. So even if the opponent is splashy, I don't really hate raising to 1500. I think it's probably a very solid play. I personally don't mind limping in scenarios like that, though. All right, flop comes king, queen, jack, big blind checks, under the gun bets 1200, so roughly the size of the pot. Should we fold, call, raise to 3000, or raise to 4,500.
Interesting. This is exactly the flop you don't want, because there's not a lot to go on here. He bets the full pot. I kind of hate this, and I hate to just in game. I'm gonna answer what I would do in game. Now I'd have to have some really specific knowledge on this player, that he was super splashy. But limping and then betting the full pot into two other players, I'm probably ahead right now, like 50-50, but what do I do on the turn? You know what I mean? He can easily have all the two pairs. He can have, Jack 10. He can have, Queen 10. All the hands with a 10 in them that just have so much fucking equity. I think in game I'm just going to fold here. I'm sure Jonathan has something deeper to say, although it is kind of a surface level question. I'm just going to fold.
I think our only good option here is to call. I don't hate folding. I mean, I think it's reasonable if you think the splashy player is mostly just betting.
That being said, we have a ton of blinds, right? It's just the fact that he bet the full pot into two players that I really don't like, so it does speak that he has more equity but not more showdown than us. Like, he has all the 10s in his hand, but we do have top pair. The problem is we have to fade, 8 straight cards. We have to fade the 10s, you know what I'm saying, that give him probably two pair, and then probably the queen or the jack we have to fade as well, just because we block the king. And it's very likely that he would have opened king-queen if he's going to play it out of first, and king-jack suited, things like that. So I think most likely we're up against queen-10 or queen-jack. And I just think it's one of those spots that this is something that I do a little bit differently, and it's just a preference, right? If I was running this table over, this hand would have never happened because I would have 3-bet it pre-flop. So limping on the button with a big stack. I mean, I got 252 big blinds, and the starting stack looks to be 150 blinds, right? So I'm never going to get to this situation, but I think for me the fold is better. But Jonathan, obviously, it's very close between folding and calling, and the thing that I didn't consider is how many blinds we have. If this pot gets too big, we can easily fold later, but we are kind of folding quickly on the flop, so I get that.
Purely for value with all of his best hands. I think a lot of people see pot size bets in small pots like this. Notice this pot's actually only pretty small on the flop. It's only 4 big blinds. A lot of people see a pot size bet and they go, oh man, that's a big bet, I better fold. But in reality, people usually do bet bigger in general in small pots in relation to the pot, and also a lot of people just view 1200, 4 big blinds is not that many chips.
Yeah.
So I don't think this bet size necessarily indicates a polarized range or a strong hand. I think this very easily could just be a bet with whatever range this guy's betting with, like ace queen, jack queen 9, jack 10, jack 9, whatever. So I don't really see how we can fold. Also, there's no reason to think the big blind has a good hand here. If anything, this flop doesn't connect especially well with the big blind, so I think we need to call and see what develops. You do have to be very careful in multi-way pots, but I think calling in this scenario is fine. If we do call and big blind calls or raises, well, if he raises, we're going to fold, right? If we call and he calls, and on the turn under the gun blast it, I'll probably just fold then. But otherwise, I think we're being reasonable shape.
I mean, this
So I
is...
do call. We don't want to raise on this flop, by the way, because it's pretty easy for under the gun to just have 10-9 suited, ace-10 offsuit, king-jack, queen-jack, right? It's really easy for under the gun to actually have a pretty good hand here, so we don't want to raise. Also, we could just be trapping with, like, aces, kings, queens, pre-flop, and made a set. So we call, and big blind calls. So 3 ways going to the turn, and now they check to me. Should we check, bet 1,400, bet 2,800, or bet 5,600?
So there's a general rule of thumb that I've learned from Jonathan Little, which is you want to bet with your best draws and your marginal made hands. Our hand's not getting any better, so this is marginal, right? 3-way pot. When we see the check, we still don't have to be ahead, but there's a much better chance, you know, because that betting that on the flop kind of buys you the river if nobody else has anything great. So I don't think we can allow it to check through. And he is right. It is so early in the tournament that some players will just go, oh, well, 4 big blinds and just bet it and not realize it's the size of the pot. So that doesn't really matter. So he's right. This is why these streams are called Wake Up With Me, because this kind of gets my head into the right space to play good, strong, fundamentally sound poker. Okay, so when it goes, you know, the small blinds, or the big blinds, really my problem here. Like, he can have all the 2 pairs. And he should expect the big blind to continue betting, or the first position to continue betting. That being said, I think I like a bet. And the pot's 5K, so I'm going to bet about 1/3 of the pot. We could check easily, but I think I want to bet here for 2 reasons. One, I want to get value versus the hands that are drawing. You know, with a 10. Which they're going to call. We don't need to bet crazy. Like, I even think 2,800 is a little bit big. I don't think I would go as low as 1,400. I might go 2,000 here. But that being said, I don't want to bet too much. So I'm going to say 1,400. And this also buys us a showdown, right? So let's say we bet the 1,400 and it goes even call. And the river comes off and it goes check. And the river is a queen, right? Bad card for us. Or a 9 or an ace or something like that, we're going to get checked to a lot, even when these players make their hand. And when they don't, if they decide to bet at us, well, we can comfortably fold. So I think we just try to get a little bit more here, and we kind of buy the river. We kind of want them to check to us. Now, if a king hits the river, then we can make some value plays. So I'm going to bet 1,400.
All right, this is a bizarre scenario because normally...
Yeah, it is.
We would want to be very cautious in this situation. However, this board is very coordinated, and when the under-the-gun player checks to us on the turn, it's highly likely he does not have a very premium hand like 2-pair or better, which in my mind means he's kind of capped at pocket aces. Maybe ace-king, maybe ace-10, maybe ace-jack. I'm sorry, maybe... What am I saying? Capped at pocket aces. So that means he could have aces, ace-king, king-10, king-9, king-7, etc., right?
Right.
But he could also have a whole lot of queens and a whole lot of jacks. Notice I blocked the king as well, right? Also, the big blind probably doesn't have a great hand because he would have raised the flop. That means that I'm going to be against usually at best pocket aces, but at worst, a lot of hands that have a lot of equity, like queen 9 and jack 10. And those hands are going to be kind of unlikely to raise me because I could be sitting here with very decent hands too. So I think this is a spot where we want to bet for value and protection given the pot's multi-way. If the pot was heads up, I would probably let this go check and then just call any river bet. But multi-way, now we have to worry about lots more cards being bad for me on the river. Like, for all I know, maybe the big blind has queen 2 and a random 2 is bad for me, right? It's impossible to know. So given I do have to worry about all the cards in the deck on the river, I think we need to bet the turn. Using a medium bet size, we don't want to bet too big, because if we bet like 5,600, now the opponents are going to call mostly with hands that beat me. But if I bet 2,800, they could still call with some worse hands like queen 10, jack 10, jack 9, right?
This is a blind spot that I have, and I noticed these. I noticed these yesterday and the day before, and honestly, I've been noticing these all week. In these turn situations where I have situations like this, which for me don't come up often. I mean, these aren't common deals here. But I've realized I have a blind spot here, which is I tend to underbet it. So this one kind of hits me in the heart. Now, I am just waking up. Like I said, my brain's not fully active. But I'm kind of mad at myself because I know I have this issue and I didn't make the right choice. Now, granted, if I was going to bet the turn, I think I would have gone 2/3, which is the bet. When I'm realizing that I probably have the best hand and I want to really charge draws and I want to really dissuade somebody with like you said, Queen Deuce from calling, because it gets rid of just the junk that can outdraw me. So the bet is 2/3. It's not small. The small bet happens on the flop there. So if we would gotten check two on the flop, that's where we would bet 1/3. But on the turn, it's 2/3. So I would have bet 3,000, which is 2,800. It's right there. So this is a blind spot for me. That's frustrating. That really upsets me. I know it's a small thing, and I know we're learning, but I've had this situation come up about probably 5 or 6 times in the last 4 or 5 sessions I've put in, which you're talking about 5 or 6 times in about 3,000 hands, maybe closer to 4,000, which doesn't sound like a lot, but everything kind of matters. You know what I'm saying? So this is more common than you think. Now, the way I play with raising and re-raising and betting the flop, or just folding on this flop in particular, I'm not going to get here often, but when I do, I have a serious blind spot here, and I really got to address it. So I'm glad Jonathan brought this up.
If I don't want to bet 1,400 though, because then I'm giving the opponents very, very good odds to call, and they shouldn't fold with anything, and they're not really making a mistake. Remember, you want your opponents to make mistakes, and when you bet really tiny, if they're just going to call with all their hands that are getting the right price to call, they're not making a mistake. So this is a spot where I think we want to go something like 2,800, maybe 3,200. I think 3,200 may be a little bit better, but I think we do need to bet in this spot. And again, fold if we get raised. If we bet and get called, we're definitely going to check it behind on the.
One thing I have gotten better at is recognizing spots where I'm going to bet and get fold if I get raised. So I didn't consider that part of the decision tree.
Because then we could be against King 10, pocket aces, etc. This time, though, they both fold and we pick up the pot. And notice in this scenario, whatever these two players had some equity. And they folded, which means we collected that equity.
Interesting. I mean, Jonathan Little is so robotically GTO that, like, he can what he says, he's done all the solver work and all like that, and he's got it so well down that I doubt nothing that he says. So I want to do another one of his. He kind of always snaps me into the right mindset. And you see, they're not easy to get, right? Like, and what I do is I used to go back through and do the tests again. And do them until I had all green scores. I think that's improper. I think you now have a reference for where your blind spots are, and this is a turn blind spot right here. I can see it because of all the streets of betting: pre-flop, flop, turn. This is a turn blind spot, so maybe I want to go back and look at that. This one I messed up the turn and the river. You know what I'm saying? And so I think it's good to have these little underscores. When you don't score 10, you can go back and analyze those, and it's like a quick reference. It's like taking notes on yourself in a very fun way, actually. Same tournament. Let's go ahead and play the Jack 9 with Jonathan Little. Here we go.
Here we have Jack 9 of clubs facing an under-the-gun raise and a cutoff call. Folds around to us. Should we fold? Call. Re-raise to 2,300 or re-raise to 4,000.
So we have a loose aggressive player here, and that makes the case for squeezing. Then we have a tight player under the gun. If the tight player was coming out of the hijack, maybe, then we could go for the squeeze. But a tight player under the gun, I don't think we want to get blown off our hand, and our hand plays well 3 ways post flop. So I believe the only answer here is to call.
This is a very, very easy call. You essentially never want to be 3-betting the good suited connected hands from out of position against a tight position raise.
Did I not click call? I thought I clicked call.
Here we have This
I must have
is
misclicked.
a very, very easy call. You essentially never want to be 3-betting the good suited connected hands from out of position against a tight early position raiser because you're going to get 4-bet a decent amount of the time. And you really don't want to get 4-bet with a hand that flops very well. So easy call. If you had to 3-bet, I would make it about 4,000. It's usually about 3 times the last bet plus any additional money in the pot. Plus a little bit more because we're out of position, which comes out to about 4,000. So if I am going to 3-bet, that's the amount, but I'm literally never 3-betting in this scenario. Flop comes Jack 6-4. 2 hearts. Should we check, bet 1,000, bet 2,000, or bet 3,000?
There's a couple schools of thought here. I think in game, it's most important to do what's most. In scenarios where we're not super strong, I think we want to do the most common thing. And betting here is uncommon. And it kind of caps our range right up front. And here's the thing, we're blindly betting. Because under the gun can have all the big pairs. He can have queens, kings, and aces. And I think we want to determine that before we put any money in. The loose aggressive player obviously can have more draws, but he can also have hands like queen jack, you know what I'm saying, king jack, things like that. So we're going to be cautious and check.
This is a situation where you pretty much always want to check. While this board is somewhat coordinated, it's also very easy for under the gun to have a hand like an overpair. And the cutoff could certainly have ace jack, king jack, queen jack, jack 10, right? So this is not a scenario where you want to lead with pretty much anything. If you had to develop a leading range, it would pretty much only be 2-pair sets and junky draws.
Right, monsters.
In
And
terms of
crap.
draws, maybe hands like
3,
8-7 of
5.
diamonds. Basically hands that are not quite good enough to check call that have some equity.
Right.
That way when you're betting, you have just either the super nuts or you have a draw that has a little bit of equity. You don't really want to be leading your good draws because when you lead your good draws and get raised, it's pretty bad.
You get blown
You
off
don't want
them.
to be leading your marginal made hands because if you lead your marginal made hands and get called or raised, it's pretty bad. So you'd much prefer to just check and see what develops. Also, sometimes you're going to check, under the gun's going to bet, cutoff's going to raise, then we just get to easily fold. Or under the gun bets big and cutoff calls, in which case we also easily fold. This time, though, check, check, lag, probably, player in the cutoff bets 2,000. Should we fold, call, raise to 5,500, or raise to 7,500?
These are tough because we know he's a loose aggressive player. And in that case, you kind of want him to keep betting because he's going to bet. He's inclined to bet with shitty hands. Of course, he's going to bet all the draws. And here's the next wrinkle to that. We're not going to bet him off the draw. So I think we're going to allow him to bet and feel okay and then go to the turn, and that's where we would make our biggest moves. I find that when you make your biggest moves on the turn, you kind of freak people the fuck out. So I'm just going to go ahead and call here. Plus, we still have the player under the gun in the big blind. You know, or under the gun, I'm sorry. He could still have aces. Or let's say he has the ace king of hearts, right? If we just call here, he's going to raise. Now his range is so strong. If this player comes along, we can easily pitch the jack 9. Even though we might be ahead technically, it's one of those ones where we don't have enough overall equity to continue with versus, you know, flush draws and 2 overcards and all this kind of stuff. So I think we're obviously too strong to fold, but I don't like raising here very much. If I was going to check raise, like if I knew this player was just a nit and he would have bet all his overpairs and good draws, I would probably make it 7,500 just to try to kill pot. And then if this guy continued, I would have to make big moves from there. But we have a lot of blinds, man. If we get in a lot of blinds, we kind of are always beat. So I'm going to call here.
We have a very clear marginal made hand here. You're going to find that if you look at the game theory optimal solvers, they pretty much always like to just call with top pair marginal kicker. Because if you raise, what's going to call you? Well, mostly top pair with a really good kicker or flush draws or straight draws, right? All these hands that have lots of equity against you. So this is a situation where we just want to minimize the size of the pot. We don't want to bloat the pot and have to face a re-raise because then we're probably in pretty bad shape. In general, you want to keep your opponent's range as wide as possible when you have a hand that does well against a wide range but not so well against a tight range, and that's what top pair marginal kicker is. So we call. We're going to check every turn, even if we get a 9. Check, check. River is the 6 of spades. Interesting spot. Should we check, bet 1,000, bet 5,000, or bet 13,000?
So it goes check, check on the turn. Typically, this means that our opponent had a draw. Now, he can have a 6 sometimes for sure, suited 6, whatever. I don't think he's ever going to check a straight, so like the 5-3, I think he continues betting on the turn. The 8-9, I think, would continue bluffing on the turn. So I think he's got a little something. That being said, there's more draws here than good hands, and if we lead, I mean, hands like King Jack, Jack 10, all like that, they're all going to call us, and hands that are like busted flush draws are never going to call us, right? But we just check called the flop, the turn went check check, and now the river's here. I think this is an instance where we just check and allow our loose aggressive opponent, since we have that raise or we have that read, to go ahead and bluff at us, because I don't think we accomplish anything by betting. So I'm just going to check and see if he bets.
So I think we can go one of two ways here. We can either check, looking to very easily check call, right? Because we're going to induce plenty of bluffs if we check.
My real problem is that if we bet and we get raised, we're kind of screwed. Like, we kind of put ourselves in a bad situation. So I'm avoiding those difficult spots because I'm uncomfortable in them. But most people are uncomfortable in them. But as you learn more and more and more, like Matt Affleck says, you want to create the uncomfortable positions, because if you play them better, then it's okay to be in them. That being said, this is probably the main event again. Yeah, it is the main event. World Series of Poker main event. I'm not getting overly fancy this early in the tournament, so that's why I like checking, but we'll see.
Or we can value bet. The problem, though, is that if we bet here, we have to ask, will this player actually call a big bet? And I would say the answer is probably not. Will they call a big bet with an underpair? Probably not when we have loads of 6s in our range. And if they have a jack and I bet big, we just lose more money than necessary, right? So this is a spot where I don't really like a 5,000 bet. I definitely don't like a 13,000 bet, because then you're just always going to get called and you're in terrible shape. Whenever you're betting very big, you want to be betting very polarized with your best made hands and draws. And this is a good made hand. Don't get me wrong. It's good, but it's certainly not the super nuts. Like right here, if we're betting big, it needs to be mainly with 6s and straights, which, Jack 9's nowhere near that good. So the question becomes, do we check or do we bet tiny? I like the tiny bet of 1,000 compared to a small value bet of 2,000. I do think a small...
There's also a benefit there. I think 1,000 in game might be a little bit too small just because it is the main event, but there's also a benefit of blocker betting. If I was going to blocker bet this 6,800 in the pot, I'd probably bet like 2,200 or so.
A value bet of 2,000 is reasonable and acceptable, but I think a 1,000 bet is way better against a loose aggressive player. Why? Well, because a loose aggressive player is going to sporadically raise you when you bet small.
Right.
And you have to ask, do you want to get raised in this scenario? Well, you better have a plan before you bet small in this spot, because it could either be an easy call or an easy fold, depending on the scenario.
Yeah.
But I think if we bet 2,000 or 2,500, we're going to get called by a lot of worse hands, which is fine. But I think if we bet small, that may result in our opponent getting creative. That said, if you think the opponent's just going to be straightforward, which is not the case because this is a loose aggressive player, if you think they're going to be straightforward, you're probably better off just betting 2,500 or 2,000 in this scenario. This time I do go 800, really small. And the opponent raises to 9,000. They put us to the test. They blast us.
Wow.
Should we fold, call, or go all in?
Okay. It's not the raise I was expecting to see. I was expecting to see like 6,000. I was not expecting to see 9,000. It is polarized. I think this is one that's hard to get right. I think we do the math on this one. So I'll do it on the calculator so you guys can see it. So, man. So there's 6850 plus our 800 plus his 9,000. Oh, 9,000. 1650. All right. Let's show it all together. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. So 1650, and we have to call 8,200. Okay. So 1650, right, is what's out there, plus the 8,200 for our call. 24,850. So we have to call 8,200 divided by 24,850. So we have to be right about 33% of the time to make this a profitable call. Now we're going to get into whether or not we should raise, but let's construct a range here, okay? Let's bring up Equilab, and we're going to construct a range. Now, I'm going to kind of cheat by taking out the hands with no equity, okay, and taking out the obvious hands. So I'm not going to give him aces, kings, queens, shit like that, right? With this board, we're going to give him... I don't think we give him any jacks, because this is not a play you make with a good jack. You know what I'm saying? Even if you wanted to go for value, you're not going to make this big a bet with a good jack. You know, jack king, jack 10, all those, I think you don't just call, you would raise, but you'd make it like 4,000. So I'm not going to give him any jacks, so I'm cheating. So I'm going to give him all the suited aces that don't 3-bet, which from a loose aggressive player, I think we can go let's go ace 9 on down. Okay, and we're saying if he has the ace whatever of hearts, right? And we can do the same for the suited kings. Okay. What other hands that have flopped, you know, and had equity, bet the flop, and then check the turn? So we're going to give him the suited connector combos, things like 5-4, 6-5, 7-6, 8-7, 8-6, obviously, 9-6. 2 6s is possible, although I don't think it's very likely, but let's give it to him anyway. He could have pocket 4s for sure. He could have feared we made a straight out of the big blind. That's fine, and then seen a great river and then gone from there. He could have pocket 5s and be doing this because he blocks all the, a lot of the 5s block a lot of the straight draws. He could have hands like 9-10, 10-8. We're not going to give him any jacks. 9-8 suited. I'm not going to give him any off varietals because I don't want to make it just too crazy. I think obviously the 9-7 suited, the 7-5 suited, 6-4 of course. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. 6-4. 5-3 makes a straight. 4-3, yeah, I could see it. What other hands? I guess we can give him exactly pocket jacks, although it's very unlikely, but with all the draws out there, I would kind of bet something on the flop and then check the turn and then go for my big value on the river, so I could see that. I think we can give him, you know what, let's give him king 10 suited. I think that's fine. King queen suited, I think, from a loose aggressive player. Now, the player did raise under the gun. Let's give it to him. That's fine. I think ace 10 suited is just way too often 3-bet. What about suited queens? Queen 9 suited for sure. Queen 10 suited, yeah. We're not going to give him the jack. Yeah. Queen 8, sure. Yeah, that's fine. Some players play the computer hand, Queen 7. Suited 10s, I think we got them all. 8-5. 6-3. Yeah. There's a lot of 6s in his range. Okay. So we're not going to go into the offsuit shit, right? He could also have hands. He can have hands like ace jack off, ace 10 off. Those are just little interesting things, though. Okay, so here's his range, I would say. So let's put that down. And the flop is the jack of hearts, the 4 of hearts, 6 of diamonds. The turn is the 7 of clubs. Oh, this is a lot of... And this all goes on in your head. I've done these like thousands of times. This all goes on your head as you're playing. Okay, so there's the board. And we have specifically the jack 9 of clubs. Okay. What's our equity? Whew. That did not go the way I thought it was going to go. We have 78%. Wow. Okay, this made my decision a lot easier. because I was going to contemplate jamming to get him off of something, but I don't think he's doing this with a good jack. Once I came to that conclusion, and I see that this hand holds 78% equity versus range, whoa, I was way off. I'm calling. I'm calling here all day. Because like we said, we only need 33%. We only need to be right 33% of the time. And we have induced the creativity from this guy. This is his creativity. And big bets, you know, a lot of players know that they have to make big bets polarized. With 78%? Wow. That's crazy. I'm calling all day, man.
This is a very easy call. And the reason it's a very...
Okay, Jonathan Little said it's a very easy call. Not if you haven't done that hand and ranged this guy properly. This was tough, but I'm glad that I was able to have the steps this is how you do it. You find the steps to go through and figure out how much equity your hand really has against the hands that this guy most likely has. And in that scenario, it's an easy call, but you have to know that.
Very easy call is because this is what we've induced. We've set this up. This is what we want to happen. Whenever you do make small bets in this scenario with a marginal made hand, you want to be especially prone to call off in scenarios where you do not block any of the obviously busted draws. So here, I really don't want to have any hearts, and I don't want to have any diamonds. You may say, why diamonds? Because a lot of people will bet the flop in our opponent's shoes with like queen 10 of diamonds. And they'd also bet the flop with like queen 10 of hearts and maybe not want to check raise it because I could very easily be sitting here with two pair, right? So when we bet small against a loose aggressive player, the goal is to induce a bluff. We want this guy to raise. And he raised. So good. Easy call. If I made a small bet with really any hand in this scenario against a loose aggressive player, I mean, I can tell you as an exploitative play, I am very, 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 very inclined to call against the loose aggressive players. Even if I had a blocker, like say I had queen of diamonds jack or queen of hearts jack, which would be a pretty bad card to have because I think a lot of people will bet the flop with stuff like king, queen, king 10, queen 10, etc. With a backdoor flush draw. I think a lot of people will bet with those hands and then just give up, but then get tricky when this happens. Even with a very relevant blocker like the king of hearts, king of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, 10 of hearts, whatever, I'm still just going to call because we have induced this play. If you don't want this to happen, don't bet small to begin with and just check instead and easily check call any bets. But this is a spot where we've induced this. This is what we want. We're going to gobble it up. Sometimes we lose, by the way. We could be against a 6. Nothing is saying that we could not be against a 6 some portion of the time. But if you think about the opponent's range, they really don't have a ton of 6s in it just because they don't play a whole lot of 6s pre-flop, you wouldn't think. And they do play a lot of random overcards and undercards that have missed their draw, whatever their draw could be. There's lots of busted draws. So when there's lots of busted draws, a pretty reasonable strategy is to set up the overly loose aggressive players to bluff you, and betting tiny is a very, very nice way to do that. So anyway, easy call. Opponent did have one of the backdoor draws, which makes a lot of sense, right? They bet the flop when check 2, got a terrible turn, so they're just going to give up. And then we got him on the river.
The thing I'm proud of about this hand review is that we slowed down, did the math at a time when we got a chance to do it. That's the point of these, is that if we go through all the steps, we find a hard spot, and we don't just go, well, I think this play... No, jackass, that's not the way you play poker anymore. You got to run all the equities, see what your hand plays like versus a range, not a specific hand. Don't let this board influence you, because because he's using his position. The board shouldn't influence you much here. You just put in his likely range. And like he said, sometimes we're going to lose. You know, he's going to have those 5-3s, those 6-4s. But I gave him all the chances to win. All the chances to win based on this board. And here's the thing. On Equilab, if we put in all the possible hands that he could call, we even have like 90 or 83% equity, I believe. Like, we got an extra 5%. But we left those out. We left out all the hands that don't keep going. So I put in the king-queen suited. I didn't even put in the king-queen suited because I would have thought this player would have 3-bet. So I didn't even count that one. So I even went tighter. So I was wrong versus true range. But I'm very proud that I did the numbers. I went it through Equilab. We did a good hand analysis. And I went, oh, this is an easy call. All day. All fucking day. Like, I didn't doubt it at all. Once I saw the math, it was like, that's what we do. That's how you come to these answers. That's why you do these quizzes. That's why you take the time out of game to study and come up with the right spot. And I guarantee you, this is going to come up for me very soon. I think this move is going to come up in like a 1650 buy-in 6 max for sure. For sure. Within the next week, I'm going to see this spot and I'm going to snap it right the fuck off. And it's going to be one we're going to have to review later, but either way, win or lose, I'm going to recognize this spot, and it's going to be fucking amazing. I mean, just because of the way the betting went, it just makes so much sense. I'm really proud of that. Like, here's the thing. On Jonathan Little's site, there's a thing where he gets called Yoda or the robot. There's a reason for that. Because he just knows the shit and just trusts. And it doesn't matter all the little things you have in your head, all the little emotional feelings you have. It doesn't matter. What matters is what we're doing and the actual odds. And it was an easy call once I saw it, so yeah, definitely happy with this one and definitely very proud of my own reaction. And that's awesome. Well, it's about 1:45. I think I'm going to go ahead and end the stream there because that's a real high note. I like the way that we went through it, but that's how you go through these hands. If you run into something, use Equilab, use calculators. You can come up with the great answers. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead. I got a couple errands to run. I want to play tonight. I feel pretty good. So that's my plan, is to come back around 4 p.m. Vegas time. That's Pacific Standard. And play some good tournaments, man. And good luck to you guys on your grind, and I'll see you later. And there it is.